caffeinated beverage just for you.
Good Lord, that's full. Yeah.
You drink yours black? That's disgusting.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, is this a family friendly show, by the way?
Not really.
Okay.
People have said many things.
Okay. Just checking, just prefacing ahead of time.
I had this one guy who was on here. He was an astronomer from Mobile, head of the Mobile County head of the Mobile County Astronomical Society or Astronomy Society. He said, he said garden variety rape would be better than getting sucked into a black hole. I'm like, oh my God. I was like, okay, we're doing a podcast.
That is an opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that's only one way to take that. All right, if you can hear me, I can hear you. What are we going to talk about?
Yeah, so my background, I guess technically, is in experimental psychology, and I've been working with like human factors stuff, so like people interact with technology. I focus sort of a lot on artificial intelligence, but I have like a very active interest in personality research and how I guess personality has been researched over the last like 200 years plus years or so, and trying to figure out people's personality traits. And so I like talking about that kind of stuff, but really I can go on about anything. And I have the results of that test that you sent me earlier. So if you want to go over that and get like an in-depth analysis of who you are as a person.
Oh yeah. What was the for all the three people listening at home? What was the test called? The Huxaco?
Oh, the Hexaco.
Hexaco, yeah.
Yeah, Hexaco.
Sucker was in depth.
Yeah. And actually, hold on, I have my little notepad here. I've been making over the last couple days.
It asked me if I would buy stolen property if I was down on my luck.
Yeah. How'd you answer?
No.
Actually, yeah. So I mean, that's what makes it interesting. So the Hexaco uses a trait-based approach to personality, and to give you like a quick, the hell are you? Get out of here, you! Some little critter came to say hello.
Don't worry, I'll have about 2 children in here in a minute. They love being on here.
Have them take it as well. Yeah, so that really started developing this trait-based approach, trying to figure out if we can use like individual qualities to identify personality characteristics back in the like early to mid 1900s. But to give you an idea, so like when we talk about personality, we're talking about like long-lasting or enduring characteristics, right? Not something that just kind of pops up and goes away, but ideally exists throughout the course of someone's life that will help, or sort of that will influence the way they behave, think, act, that sort of thing, right? That's personality in a nutshell. And people have been really interested about this for a long time. And back in the 1700s or so, this dude named Francis Gall said, hey, I think that the way somebody acts or behaves is linked to their nervous system, right? To their brain. And I mean, like people had this idea back in the like BC times, right? Like not Galileo, I'm sorry. Plato, for example, talked a bit about it. Hippocrates talked a little bit about it, right? And they sort of had this idea that the brain was linked to behavior, but they really didn't have any kind of way of looking at it, right? Then this dude comes around the 1700s and says, well, actually, I do think these two things are related. And then it takes off from there. He's the guy who came up with, what's it called? Phrenology. Have you heard of phrenology before?
I haven't, no.
No, I'm sure you have, like in a context. It's the idea that the shape of someone's skull will determine how different parts of their brain work.
I have heard of that.
Yeah, it's called phrenology. Yeah,
I have heard of that,
dude. And this was a big thing. Richard.
That's big in the conspiracy world. That kind of podcast. That's big in that genre.
Dude, I hope it's defunct. I hope that people no longer promote that kind of idea.
Yeah.
And actually, what they used to do, Richard Dawkins talks about this in The Mismeasure of Man. There was this idea that bigger brains made you smarter, right? Or meant that you were smarter. So to measure the size of someone's brain, what they would do is take someone's skull, usually criminals or someone that were executed, right? And then they would just fill it with a bunch of like metal BBs, right? And then they would say, okay, well, based off of the number of metal BBs that we were able to fit in here, this person has like X-sized skull. And they would just compare a bunch of different people. And what we ended up finding out is the presumption was that criminals would have smaller skulls, which is why they're criminals. They have smaller brains, not as intelligent, whatever. But it turned out that criminals often had larger skulls than like the average population. So it made that whole hypothesis like defunct. But yeah, it was like a really big thing back there, or back in that sort of day and age. And, kind of promoted a lot of I guess like biological determinism and this idea that like your biology determines everything about who you are as a person, and that has uh, not really held up over years. But yeah, so that happened, and then in 1848, there was this case of Phineas Gage. He was a railroad foreman who was working here in the U.S. And I guess he was trying to put down blasting charges, but it went off early and shot a metal rod through his skull. Right?
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. But he survived. And it took out like a large part of his frontal cortex. It just went straight up and through, right? And again, we had this idea that brain and behavior are linked, but there really wasn't any way of testing that or showing that, right? And what people found was that before the incident happened, he was like a very stalwart kind of guy, very like brass tacks on the dot. I think he was religious, that sort of thing. And then his whole personality changed, right? He didn't have a whole lot of filters anymore. He would go off on people. He had a whole lot of anger and aggressive issues, right? He just couldn't like maintain himself, and he became sort of a case study about the link of brain and behavior.
Okay, so have you ever heard of Sam Kinison?
No, who's that?
He's a comedian from the 70s and 80s. Same thing, exact same scenario. Had
Yeah,
a
we
t-
had like
had a
go ahead.
TBI, completely changed.
Yeah, and I mean it makes sense, right? And the argument then is like, well, where is personality stored in your brain? And the answer is kind of everywhere, right? So if you have like more emotional reactions to stuff because of who you are as a person, the limbic system, the emotional part of your brain that processes fear and stuff, that's probably more active than somebody else, right? So it's not just like we have a personality section like in the frontal cortex or like somewhere towards like the back or whatever. It's just kind of the way the whole system works as a network. And so yeah, getting slapped in the head too hard can totally do that. You
Yeah,
become
he did just like you were talking, stalwart, real quiet, and all of a sudden he's a shock jock comic.
really.
Yeah, he was one of the most nasty ones that was around.
You're talking about like just real crass kind of humor, yeah?
Oh yeah, I mean it was loud, obnoxious. He was a classic. He's up there with Pryor.
Really?
Yeah, and George Carlin, those kind of guys.
Yeah, how strange. It's like a
He was
sci-fi
around
kind
that
of thing.
era.
It almost reminds me of like the Mask with Jim Carrey.
Hmm.
Yeah, just in
Very
his
close.
case, he just got slapped in the head too hard. Yeah, so from there it goes into the 1900s. Here's where it gets kind of juicy, I think. So do you know much about like Sigmund Freud?
Yeah, I took a couple of psychology classes in college.
Okay,
Sadly,
solid. So sadly, yeah, it hasn't really worked out for me
one
so
had a
far.
one had like a hot like grad school teacher, and one the one I took in Northeast, the guy that taught it is crazy now. He had like a nervous breakdown. So
Yeah, I mean, it sounds pretty like sort of run of the mill for psychology classes in general.
yeah,
I don't know why, man, but like a bunch of like attractive freshman kids are like typically attracted to psychology early on. Like you'll see it for like
yeah.
the first 2 years or so. That and then the crazy people. Like it just there really is no middle ground. There's one or the other.
I didn't understand it because he kept acting like psychology was my major. I'm like, clearly we're here because this is a core class. He goes, as a psychologist, I'm like, we're not going to be psychologists. Most
let
everybody
you,
here is on opioids right now, man.
let you know up front. Where'd you go to school?
That was at Northeast. It was up on Sand Mountain. That was just a community college. I went to Alabama. I finished in Alabama.
Gotcha. Where is Northeast? I think of Northeastern, like up in, I mean, the Northeast.
No, it's on Sand Mountain. It's about 50 miles east of Huntsville.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've never even heard of that place.
Yeah, it's called Harvard on the Hill. It's up on Sand Mountain.
Harvard on the Hill. Feel like you
Yep.
got like an Ivy League education there?
Yeah, I got it. I skipped a whole lot of class.
Okay.
Went to Alabama, made straight A's because I didn't have my tree stand or cooler to hang out on.
Got the kudzu
Mhm.
level education, I guess.
Yep. Took me moving away from my hometown to get any kind of good grades.
No, I hear that. I think that's real though. I think like once you're in a new place and kind of like experiencing new things, like just like the way you approach things changes in general. You know what I mean?
Oh man, I didn't have any distractions there. Is go to class or go to my apartment.
Yeah, no, dude, I totally get it. And like I tell people, because like you haven't been in Huntsville. How long have you been in Huntsville for?
Well, I grew up about 40 miles away from it, so I've been here like in the area my whole life. But I've lived here since '09, and I've worked here since '07.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I grew up here for most of my life, right? So my family moved to
Mhm.
Madison in 2000 and kind of went from there. And then around like 2014 or so, I started bouncing around the country. Like what I've noticed is like there's a lot of people from like the Madison Huntsville area that I don't think have left or gone away to experience other stuff, right? Or they've somehow found their way back. And like there's lots of friends I have who've done the same thing like I did, where you bounce out, then you come back just because it's like safe and secure, and then you bounce away again.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I'm not going anywhere.
yeah, and it's just interesting to like have that small town feel, right? And I tell people that I don't think of Huntsville as a city at all. Like it's America's largest town as far as I'm concerned.
It's funny because where I grew up, I feel like Huntsville was like the inner city.
Inner
I think
city.
it's like the biggest city. Everybody's like, "You live in the country." I'm like, "The hell I do. I grew up in the country. This ain't the country."
Dude, so when we first moved down, my cousins thought about coming down, and I'm from Boston originally, hence the rate of speech. And they're
Went to
like very
khakis.
uh that's awful. Awful. It's more like let me think. I can actually do a pretty good faux Boston accent. I don't think I've
Hey,
ever
Boston's
told
not
you.
awful. Joe Rogan and Bill Burr's from Boston.
Yeah, Bill Burr is pretty quintessential. I didn't know Joe Rogan's from Boston.
Oh yeah, grew up just down the road from Bill Burr.
How strange.
Oh yeah, he was. I think he went to not Boston College. What's the other one? Boston University.
There's like 50.
The
Yeah,
one that
Boston
the
University.
one that looks like the Red Sox. The one the logo looks like the Red Sox. I think it's Boston University.
Yeah, BU. Yeah, those people are kind of prissy, I think, but you know, that's just based off my limited interactions with them. Um, yeah, anyway, no, that's an awful Boston accent. Terrible. Garbage, dude. Garbage, dude.
Garbage.
You have to do it. I can do, yeah, I got three accents I can do. I can do Boston, I can do Christopher Walken, and I can do a very irate Vietnamese woman. Those are my three, but she has to be angry. She has to be angry.
What is happening?
No, look, all right, look.
That's really specific.
It is. The Christopher Walken one, hold on, let me see. I don't know if it, now I'm on the spot, I don't know if I can pull it out. My name is Christopher Walken. I was in such films like Balls of Fury and an episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog where I was the very depressed alien.
It's not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad, right?
It's better than the soldering iron I was doing the other day.
The soldering iron.
Happens again. Stay face with soldering iron. From Joe Dirt. When
Oh,
he played
yeah.
the mob boss.
Oh, ridiculous. Second.
Boston.
Anyway, I'll tell you my Vietnamese irate lady joke at some point. This might not be the best medium for it. It's my favorite joke, dude. It's so good, and it
Yeah,
sounds. It's
I don't want to have to edit it out.
yeah, exactly right.
I've had to do a couple of that before.
Anyway, it's better in person as well. You have to see like all the facial expressions and everything. All right, so we're really buff. Yeah, if you get hit in the head too hard, you can change your personality. Actually, my grandfather had this happen to him, where he wasn't a stern man, but he held on to his emotions very well. He was a businessman, always sort of like in control of himself and how he like presented himself. You know what I mean? But he had a really nasty fall, hit the back of his head, and all of a sudden he was a totally different man. Like even just like seeing his family would make him like well up and get really emotional. Um, what else? He started like letting go of like I guess family secrets, I guess you could call them, things they wouldn't have told people like on a normal basis, that sort of thing. And then eventually he ended up getting dementia, unfortunately, which is a whole other situation. But this idea that like we have this connection between our brain and who we are as people became really, really big in the 1900s. And you have a lot of different fragments at this point between like thoughts as to why that is. There was B.F. Skinner and the behaviorists, and they basically said that who you are is entirely determined by your experiences in life, right? That learned behavior is basically the only reason we know how to do anything. And then there was like Sigmund Freud and other people, and that actually led into the development of the Myers-Briggs personality test. And then my boy, or my boys rather, see, I think they have a whole name for themselves. No, they don't. It's just Francis Galton. That's basically all it is. He's the cousin of Charles Darwin, much of other people. But I'll start with like the Sigmund Freud people. All right. So I'm sure you've heard about Sigmund Freud and his whole idea that like everything in life is based around effectively sexuality, repressed thoughts, that sort of deal. And a lot of people make fun of him saying that it's ridiculous, but I think it's really like an artifact of the times because if you look at the time in which he was practicing medicine, and he was a psychiatrist, by the way, not a psychologist. Like they always mix this up. Psychiatrists are doctors, right? So he had a medical degree. I think he graduated like from Vienna or whatever. Psychologists are different, right? We're a different breed of people. Personal opinion.
Isn't
Um,
one can prescribe medicine and one can't?
uh,
That's a difference.
yeah, basically. So psychiatrists are medical doctors who specialize in psychiatric disorders. And because they're doctors, they can prescribe medications. And their main focus is identifying symptoms of psychiatric disorders and then trying to manage those symptoms or help eliminate them, etc. Psychologists are more interested in sort of measures of affect, behavior, and cognition. And then they use that to make informed decisions. Again, about psychiatric disorders in some cases. Some people go into counseling. A psychologist, like an actual title of psychologist, is awarded to someone who has their degree in psychology. So like I've got my master's, right? But I can't call myself a capital P psychologist. I can say that I research psychology or whatever. But if you have your doctorate, then you can call yourself a psychologist, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
Psychologist, not a psychologist.
Yeah, there you go. You're catching on.
I'm a psychologist, not a psychologist. Well, I feel it.
Yeah, and there's different routes. So like in my case, I'm doing the more experimental and applied side of things. I'm interested in like sort of scientific research for the sake of research and its applications. Other people go down a clinical route, and that's typically what we think of when we talk about like psychologists, the clinical side of things, doing talk therapy, doing like patient management, stuff like that. But they are two different sort of breeds, and clinical psychologists are distinct from psychiatrists. If you go to a place like Boston, they actually work hand in hand. You'll see a lot of psychiatrists who will pair up with a clinical psychologist, and they'll use that to manage their patient, help out with like ADHD cases or like clinical depression, bipolar cases, whatever. So you have the clinical psychologist doing all the talk therapy side of things, and then the psychiatrist is managing all of the medication, and they'll just have a joint effort. If you go to other places, like I can't speak much for Alabama, I don't really know, but there's other places where sometimes the psychiatrists take over things, other places where like the clinical psychologists don't really get along with psychiatrists and think that they're ridiculous for being doctors. Like there can be a lot of feuds depending on where you go, but they are two very different breeds of people is really what I'm trying to get at here.
I could see those two being rivals.
Yeah,
Thinking
absolutely.
one's a quack, the other one's not.
Yeah, exactly. And like all I'm saying is that Freud was a psychiatrist, all right? So for everyone to give shit to psychologists, oh, look, this is what you guys think. Look, man, he's one of your boys, okay? That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
I bet he gets called psychiatrist more than psychologist, though, because I always forget about psychologist.
Yeah, I don't know. I think people just conflate the two terms, to be perfectly honest.
I know I do. I'm guilty
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, which I mean makes a lot of sense. And it's like it's kind of nuanced, and you kind of assume they go together. And I think part of the reason is because old school, like Victorian era psychiatrists did do like talk therapy, right? Modern psychiatrists, from what I understand, are mostly oriented on diagnosing conditions and then finding a solution through medication, right? They leave all the talk therapy stuff to either clinical psychologists or counselors or whatever. But back in the day, like in the case of Freud, you have a mixture of the two. You know what I mean? Like you have the dude who prescribes medication and he's got a sofa to hypnotize you, in his case, or talk about your problems and do whatever it is you want to do.
The old sofa.
Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, that's really what sells it, I think.
Oh yeah, it's like the lady from The Sopranos. And her.
All I know about The Sopranos is the fade to black. Spoiler
Well,
warning, I guess.
one of the main characters was this psychologist who's always having or his therapist. I don't know what she was. Now that I'm confused. I'm getting the two mixed up.
But yeah, in any case, so Freud's whole idea was that life is, or who we are as people, originates from like your development over time and sexual repression. That was kind of the gist of what he was getting at, right? Without getting too far into detail. And a lot of people think that he was a quack, right? For lack of a better term. Let me move this.
See the Oedipus guy, Oedipus complex.
Yeah, Oedipus complex guy. Yeah. And Jung, Jung, one of his predecessors, or I'm not, sorry, not predecessors, protege, I guess. He had two, Jung and I think Eric Erickson. I'm gonna fact check that here in a second. Basically said the Oedipus complex isn't a real thing. That doesn't exist. Let's kind of move away from that, right? And then go from there. But I think part of the reason is because when Freud was growing up, we had Victoria era England, sort of dominated the social scene, and their one of their big tenets was the promotion of the Church of England and all of its sort of like um, branching denominations, and that would include things like repressing sexual urges. Right, that was a big thing in Victoria era England. You know the book Dracula by Bram Stoker.
Yep.
So I read that back in high school and didn't get this the first time, but then read it again later, like when I was in college. And the book is full of innuendos. It's full of a bunch of like sexual social commentary and a bunch of like jokes, like sexually oriented things that you wouldn't get unless you were sort of like paying attention to it, right? And it's also part of the reason why um not Dracula, well, I guess Dracula, but vampires in general have this like shroud of sexuality about them, right? They have this like hypnotism sort of effect where they can like, put people into a trance. The act of like sucking blood is very intimate. It's because it all arises from this period of history where sexual repression was very much the norm. So to combat that, you write about it. You create like, fantasy or fanfics or whatever about it. See what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, they definitely have that debonair thing going on.
Debonair.
That Gomez Adams. Dish.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason. And
Have
actually,
to be invited in.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, I thought that's just because they're really polite.
Yeah, that's it. Vampires they're known for their politeness.
Yeah, but they don't take their
and their baseball skills apparently.
Baseball skills.
Yeah, that's a Twilight joke. I shouldn't get that,
dude. Yeah, I don't know. That's a very old reference. That's like
Twilight is not old.
A decade old reference.
Twilight is like 10 years old.
Yeah, it's a decade, dude. That's there are. How old are your kids?
Like 9 and 7 and 1.
Yeah. All right. Oh, you have a 1-year-old too? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
I got one for every president I've been alive.
Was that intentional?
Uh-uh.
That was a lot of determination in that.
Oh, yeah. Got one for every inauguration.
Anyway, yeah, so that was Freud's whole thing. The idea that there is some innate like component, like a biological component that helps determine personality, who you are as a person, et cetera, et cetera. He also came up with the idea of the id, the ego, and the superego. And so that was, I guess, relatively revolutionary. This idea that you have these innate desires and drives, which again, I think are inspired by like, the era that he was alive. And then the ego, which is saying that you do have this consciousness that tells you, no, like we shouldn't do that, right? Or yes, it's okay to do that. And then I forget what the superego does. I don't know that much about it, to be honest. Oh yeah, that's your morality check. That's right. Is this moral or is this not? And from there, Carl Jung, who again was effectively one of his proteges, he had two, he said, well, really, let's think about personality as an underlying factor of somebody's wants and needs, right? So who you are as a person is really determined by what it is you want to do or accomplish or need to do and accomplish. He's also really well known for this concept known as the collective consciousness. I don't know if you've ever heard that before.
Mm-hmm.
So this is probably really up your alleyway, right?
Yeah, I've heard of it before. Couldn't tell you really what it was, but
it's exactly what it sounds like. This idea that you have an individual consciousness, right, who you are, but no matter where you go in the world, there are these tropes and these traits that you're always going to see. And so an example of that is like if you go to, say, I don't know, Mongolia, and you go find like a random group of people in Mongolia, they're going to have this concept of the old wise man, just like we would, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or like the caring grandmother, right? That's going to exist there. And the same is true if you go basically anywhere else. And so his big idea was that there are these universal sort of truths or these universal, I think he referred to them as mental energies that connects us all together. Modern sort of science has a different viewpoint on it. But yeah, that was his sort of concept.
The old collective. I was thinking more like along as a hive mind when you said that.
Actually, I mean that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, it's close.
A hive mind with like slight variation, which is where you get like you and me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
Yeah, if humans pretty much all have the same kind of culture until they get split up.
Yeah, and there's a lot of arguments about that. I think Gun Germs and Steel talks about that a little bit. And there's a book that I've been reading by Steven Pinker called The Blank Slate, the Blank Slate, where he talks about that as well. where people just kind of develop together until eventually they move.
Mm-hmm.
And after they move, then that's when things start to change. And on the same topic, I heard a talk from a dude over the summer called Robin Dunbar, and he's an evolutionary biologist, and he came up with something called Dunbar's number, which is the number of people that you can have a social connection with. And once you hit that number, you're basically done. It's almost like having too much memory on like a SIM card or something. You know what I mean?
That.
Yeah, you got to kick people out if you want to bring new people in.
Like you always think of like I have a hive of best friends that kind of rotates in and out.
Yeah. No, it's very real. So
like
his
7 people.
So his number is 150. You can have 150 social connections in general, and it forms tiers. So
oh yeah, well.
I gotta take this thing off, this filter thing. Yeah, so you have tiers. So you have like your inner circle, which maybe has like 1 or 2 people, maybe 3, depending on lots of things like sex or you are as a person, whatever. And then it branches out a little bit to maybe like, 7, and then it branches out a little bit to maybe like 10 or 12. And then it gets like really far out, and you have people that you just only associate with on like a facial basis. You see what I'm saying? But the idea, so the idea is that it's basically all like biologically determined, that we just have this innate capacity to only have about 150, which I guess would be the size of like a tribe or something like that. More so than that, there's an idea about like, well, where does music come from, and other things that I guess would feed into the hive mind concept. And his argument is that as people move further and further away, they need ways to sort of keep in touch, or like to have some kind of like association with one another. And so you got music trends.
I've always wondered how music is universal. It seems like that's something we know before we're born. Something we know as a infant to recognize what music is.
Nah, bro, I'm pasty AF. Like I don't got rhythm. I don't. I mean, you see me roll, dude. That is very much like this sort of situation.
You know what music is, though. I mean, you knew what music was, and you were tiny.
I don't know, because music has never been a large part of my life, and it's always weird when somebody says that like music really reaches out to them, because I just don't have that same kind of like association with it.
I'm kind of like that. I have like theme music going on in my head.
Yeah, in the background. What is it, like 80s hair metal?
No, mostly 90s country, gangster rap.
Gangster rap and 90s country.
You ain't kidding. I've always wanted to make a movie. I say this to a lot of people, and they're like, "Why are you even telling me this?" But I want to make like a Dukes of Hazzard, Smokey and the Bandit, backwoods, running from the law country movie, all gangster rap soundtrack.
Yeah, like a Moonshiner type situation.
Yeah, I want that. I want that kind of movie, all gangster rap. Just like I like it when you call me Big Papa, but they're like running from the cops.
I feel like, come to think of it, a buddy of mine introduced me to an Alabama, I think it was from Birmingham, gangster rap artist who's actually like super aggressive and really, really good. I mean, we've got to have some local guys around here who'd be down to make you a soundtrack. Yeah.
They had the guy from Mobile called Mr. Big. I know you've heard his songs. Maybe.
Mr. Big.
I thought you were older than you were.
Yeah, I'm 28. I turned 29 in exactly a month.
He had that song about having long hair and a pocket full of stones. Take the shit to trial.
I feel I know that.
It'll get me going. Like I get a free black card whenever I listen to that song.
Give me 1 second, like a brief intermission.
Brief intermission.
Yeah, I just gotta fix something real quick.
Don't break it. I had to write something down while you were talking. Had a brief intermission. Gonna change his background. He's muted. I'm gonna ask him about worlds colliding when he gets back. Maybe toward the end. I just wanted to hear about it. I don't have to edit this part out, so I'm gonna keep talking. Hear the kids screaming. I'm gonna shut my door while he's talking. But you can still hear me. 10 seconds. Baby crying in the background. Poor baby. Sister's probably messing with her.
Oh, you got family? You got family over?
Have my family.
His sister.
I said her sister.
Oh yeah.
I'm sitting here talking to the microphone. As long as I'm talking, I don't have to edit. As long as I'm talking, I don't have to edit.
Anyway, what'd you write down?
Oh, worlds colliding. I thought about that while you were talking about the music and collective the
Consciousness.
social tiers.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I had this thing that I hate when one group of friends talks to another group of friends and becomes friends. And I've always hated it. It's a Seinfeld thing, worlds colliding. You know, he said if relationship George comes into friendship George, he will kill friendship George. Is you trying to kill friendship George? Because I hate when I have friends group that meet each other. I can't stand it.
No, I'm in the same boat. We keep them very separate from one another.
I hate it. I hate it. I've used to in high school. It always happened, and my friends would start dating each other in different groups. My good lord, now I'm gonna see you all the time.
Dude, try like having a date around a circle. Going back to like what I was talking about, Huntsville, it's a small town. I think that's a serious issue here, where like a lot of people. I mean, I've seen a lot of situations where my friends are dating the same person at different points in time. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and it's not that uncommon.
I'm from Scottsboro. I've seen it in a micro level.
Well, I think in you guys, like in your case, aren't you guys into that kind of stuff? Isn't that kind of like a selling point about being down in Scottsboro, like true Alabama culture?
It kind of is, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
Get passed around like a football after Thanksgiving.
Like a joint in prison.
Woo!
It's hey man, it's my lifestyle right now.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's why I can't go to jail. Actually, that's the reason I get passed around way too much.
Hold my pocket.
Jesus.
Bikes.
Anyway. Okay, so people like the Myers-Briggs, right? Well, it kind of continued from this train of thought, right? This is one train of thought that we have this collective consciousness and people fall into different sort of categories. Jung also had this sort of split in how he thought about the way people are divided. He thought that extroversion and introversion was a primary category, which it is. If you go back even like again 400 BC or so, people back then could have told you that extroversion introversion was a thing, right? Everyone back there was able to see it. I think nowadays it's one of the easiest things to tell about somebody, right? Or if they're like an ambivert, they kind of like are very scenario dependent on how they express their introversion extroversion. And his other one was well, I'm sorry, that was like his main focus. And then he had two minor categories: whether somebody was into thinking or feeling, like whether they're very logical in their reasoning, or if they use a lot of like emotional reasoning, like they think about social interactions, people, that sort of thing. And then sensing and intuition. So this idea of like, are you very into the physical world or physical space, or are you more into abstract sort of concepts, right? And that forms the foundation of Myers-Briggs. So we came up with this back in like the 1920s, and then after that, Myers and Briggs, who were a mother-daughter pair, said, "Hey, that's really cool." And they didn't have any kind of background in psychology. They didn't have any kind of like training in psychometrics or anything, which is like the statistics analysis side of psychology. They just said, "Hey, this is really cool. Let's go ahead and make a series of questionnaires about it." And they would, I think she ran a daycare, and she would watch children and make like yes/no questionnaires based off of these 16 categories that people could have fallen into, and came up with Myers-Briggs. And this was around the time that World War II sort of like started happening and getting big, and the government took an interest in this, or I think they were trying to propose it to the government as a way of like trying to figure out, who should be doing what or how people are, etc. And then it's just gotten like really popular since then. But it's derived from Freud in the grand scheme of things.
It's very accurate.
Okay, so here's
Takes
the
forever
problem.
too.
What the Myers-Briggs?
Yeah, it's like 30 minutes.
I don't think it's that long.
I was about to die. I'm like, come on.
Do you remember what your code was?
I think it was a logician. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Can't remember the let me pull it up here. But it was like someone that focused more on not being as serious kind of thing.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and just take it again real quick, and we'll
oh my god.
go through the analysis at the end of the segment.
I'll just look at the Myers-Briggs
Sure.
levels. I remember what it was.
Is it I'm gonna guess ISFP?
Let me see. Where's the trait set? Personality types. I was a low, not logistician. I was an analyst. INTPA, I think.
INTP?
Yeah, that's what it was. INTP-A.
Okay.
Let me look at the bottom. If I recognize these people. Yep, that's it.
An INTP.
I believe so. Elliot Page. Yeah, I had Neo and Lord Varys and Bruce Banner, Aemon Targaryen, and Jack Ryan. But it was like mine was someone who's introverted, intuitive thinking, and prospecting personality traits.
I hear what the A. I know the T is for turbulent. It's like A or T is the last one. Is
A,
A
yeah, A,
assertive?
and there's A. I wonder what I was. I think that's what it was, though. I remember Kristen Stewart being one of the people, which is weird. It's another Twilight. How many Twilight references am I gonna make
Yeah,
today?
is she your spirit animal?
I sure hope the hell not. She creeps me out, man. Yeah, Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein, Kristen Stewart, Bill Gates. It's kind of weird. Yeah, turbulent and what's the A, analytical?
I honestly don't know.
What's the difference? Here we go.
Uh,
Assertive and turbulent.
it is assertive, yeah.
Yep.
No, I don't know much about Myers-Briggs. I can talk about the 4 different codes. So introverted, extroverted. I think a lot of people when they talk about introverted, extroverted, just in general, think of like the way we react to social scenarios. Like extroverted people will, go out and want to interact with a lot of different people, and introverted people will not necessarily. And I think that's true only in the sense that that's a facet of introversion, extroversion. In a grander sense, it talks about the way we interact with the world around us. And that's, I guess, a bit of what Jung was getting at. So extroverted people, from what I understand, tend to see themselves as a component of the environment around them that they like actively are associated with, whereas introverts are an element within their environment, and so that they can like actively manipulate it. They're interacting with different types of things. They're not necessarily a part of everything going on around them.
That makes sense. I'm definitely introverted at the core.
Yeah, I could see it. I could see it. I mean, honestly, when I completely wrong. I
Yeah,
thought you were very extroverted.
everybody is.
Yeah, I thought you were very extroverted when I first met you.
Because when I get in a social situation where I have no choice but to face it, I turn into this nighttime talk show host.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's amazing. If I'm in a dangerous situation, like at a hospital about to have a baby, I'm talking to the nurses like they're on my show. Like I've got the doctor interviewed. I'm like right there talking to him about everything, coming up with jokes. But given my natural environment, I'm quiet as a mouse until you get to know me that I'm loud.
Yeah, I'm gonna go into that if we ever get to the Hexaco analysis type thing. So on that, that's where Myers-Briggs comes from, right? And there's a lot of problems with it. It's not very scientifically valid and it's not very reliable, especially if you look at people across cultures. So the biggest argument stats wise is that you have these 16 categories, right? You have 4 metrics of which you can be one or the other. So if there really were just 2 categories per each of those factors, you'd expect a bimodal curve. So you'd expect like one half of the population to situate very nicely on one side and the other half to situate very nicely on the other side. And that just doesn't really happen. And it's kind of a problem with this typology approach to it. I like having a type. I like being able to say, yeah, I'm an ENFP, right? Because it's fun. It's fun to just say that I'm this thing. You know what I mean?
It's like non-hippie astrology.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I do think that there is some justice to it, and there is a group that I found in, I want to say Sweden, maybe Norway, one of those Viking countries, and they made an updated version of it called the Jungian Type Index. That's supposed to be a more accurate and valid version of the Myers-Briggs. But I'm not really sure, to be honest. I haven't looked that far into it, other than I know it exists.
I know one thing. We made everybody in the office take it.
Yeah.
And it was pretty accurate.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I
shocked.
I do like it, but the problem is like the biggest thing that everyone complains about in the scientific community is that to an extent you can find different categories that people can be placed in based off the descriptions alone. So like for example, if you are thinking versus feeling, the argument is that like you would assume that an ENTJ, for example, would be mostly T. Like they use T more so than like feeling to make decisions, right? But somebody could possibly only be T towards certain elements or be F towards other elements. Like life situations could affect the way they're scoring on the thing. And it's because you have this type-based approach where you're trying to force somebody into a box. I like it. I like trying to force people into boxes, but there's a lot of problems when you're trying to do that. Which is where the next approach came from, which is the trait-based approach. So instead of thinking about it as different categories like introversion or extroversion, you assign someone a score on like 0 to 100 on like how extroverted or how introverted they are. And they do this on the Myers-Briggs. If you like go to the 16 personalities or whatever, 16F, PF, whatever it's called, you will get a score that's like on 0 to 100. But at the end of the day, the goal is to put you one place or the other. And that's kind of where the downfall is, despite the fact that, I think it's something that's definitely interesting and can have like a lot of usefulness if it ever does become like highly reliable. So around the same time all this stuff's going on with Freud and Jung and all of them, you got Sir Francis Galton. So Sir Francis Galton was the cousin of Charles Darwin. And around the same time, Charles Darwin was coming out and saying,
like literal cousin, like related.
Yeah. Okay. I think it was like cousin or second cousin.
Okay.
Oh yeah, as opposed to like figurative cousin.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's like his science is like this close to it or something. Like literal cousin of Charles Darwin.
No, literal cousin. Yeah.
Cool.
And so around the same time that Darwin is, figuring out all of his evolution stuff, Sir Francis Galton, I guess Francis Galton until he was knighted, he was trying to approach psychology questions from a very like scientific statistical point of view. And he came up with a concept known as the lexical hypothesis, right? So his argument, and I think it's a brilliant argument, and I guess it's fun. It's fueled a lot of personality research over the last 100 years. So since like the late 1800s until like today, even, right? His idea is that if something is important to humans, we've written it down somewhere. That's the premise, right? So language should contain collectively all of the things that we think are important. Now, that being said, if we want to understand different qualities of what it means to be a person, we can use adjectives from the dictionary, break them down into as few categories as possible, and that will tell us, like, descriptors of what different people are like. See what I'm saying?
I do. That's one of those, I don't know what's the word is, like they break it down basis of humanity kind of things. It's like a good Lord, I'm retarded. It's like a baseline thing. Like if you said everything has already been written down, if it was thought of, it's already written down.
Oh yeah. So kind of like a like nothing is unique anymore type situation is what you're thinking?
Yeah, I'm thinking along the lines of like how all jokes have been told, all stories have been told.
Yeah, and so it kind of goes back to again this idea of like the collective consciousness, right? This idea that like here. And there's a lot of interesting like arguments about that. One of the things I was going to talk about with you is like how personality and how traits differ from like instincts, for example, right? Like they're very, very, very different.
Do humans have instincts? It's like
we do.
Birds building nests.
Yeah, I just finished mine the other day. Actually, it's quite nice. I got a little bit of yes, I got some twist ties in there, little bows, just for a little bit of flair. No, I couldn't find any in this area. I live by a swamp. You know what I mean? Not too good for the fabric stuff. I actually wrote some down in case this came up. All right, so when we're talking about traits, just as an example, they're enduring psychological conditions, kind of like personality, and they describe individual parts of behavior, attitudes, feeling, that sort of thing. So again, this idea is that a trait just describes something over a long period of time into why that person does something or how they do it, etc. So an instinct is an innate sort of biological mechanism that exists over generations that's unique to that species. So yeah, in the case of like birds building nests, they don't have to learn how to do it. They can just do it, right? Mm-hmm. Or what is it? Turtles, I think, go towards
the sea turtles go toward the water. The babies.
That's right. You're not retarded, you're just special.
My wife's a special ed teacher, so she's got plenty of experience.
Oh, fantastic. I'm glad to hear you're in good hands.
Yep.
Speaking of which, this podcast is sponsored by Allstate. So I don't know if you have to cut that out or not.
No, I'm not touching.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so some examples that I know of when I used to do neuroscience research back at the University of Utah, but I dropped out because I'm a big dum-dum too. And I just wasn't feeling some different aspects of it. But regardless, fox urine. So if you have a mouse, and it's been in captivity its whole life. In fact, it's been in captivity for like generations, right? So like its great 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 grandparents were part of like this mouse collection. They've never like seen the outside world. It will still be afraid of fox urine. Like if
Really?
you, what was that?
Really? Like
Yeah,
I guess it makes sense.
if you take concentrated fox urine and you just put like a little drop of it, then the mouse will exhibit a freezing response or a fear response.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, exactly. What else I got? Yeah, children.
Is it
Children
just
get some.
fox urine or any urine?
I never tried
Predator
personally.
predator pheromones. I mean,
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. And so if you ask different people why that is, you'll hear different answers. If you talk to a neuroscientist, like our lab studied olfactory sensory neurons, so the way the nose works, basically. I guess I was a smell researcher for about 2 years. And before that too, actually, I did fruit fly research before that, and I studied the way fruit flies smell stuff and taste stuff. And interestingly enough, insects do have a courtship dance that they give to one another,
hmm,
and it changes from species to species. Yeah, so fruit flies will actually vibrate their wings to different frequencies and kind of sing to their mates, and they're trying to find other fruit flies of the same species to mate with.
fruit fly research. That sounds uh I don't know, less than exciting watching a fruit fly.
Well, you just
In
have to.
Utah,
Actually, I did that here at UAH.
I was gonna say Utah fruit flies.
No,
Mormon
actually,
fruit
well,
flies.
we studied New Mexico fruit flies
Huh.
here in Alabama. If that makes it any better. We actually went out one day to collect fruit flies from the wild to see what we could find here. We found a Japanese fruit fly just chilling out in Montesano.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
Exchange student probably.
uh, just brought him over in a banana. Is that what you're saying? Actually, the Japanese ones use strawberries, I think, if I remember correctly. And maybe that's wrong. That might be completely wrong. But
I
they
wonder
have
what kind I
these
used to have in my apartment. I used to have a bunch.
probably melanogaster. That's what everyone has around here. Yeah, the red eye fruit flies.
Oh yeah, they were nasty.
So we actually studied cactus fruit flies. That was my whole thing.
Courtship dance of the wild fruit fly.
You got it. Boom. You're an expert as well, huh? But they'll do like different dances to one another. They'll do like different wing beats. Insects all have these crazy little things that do together, and all sorts of species have different uh behaviors and ways that they interact with one another as well as the environment. And humans have their own stuff too. A good example with children is the grasping response. So if like I'm sure you've seen this with like your 1 year old. If you hold your finger out, they'll grasp it and they'll hold on to it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, exactly, just like that. And that is something that all babies do, right? You could make the argument that it's just a neurological response, right? It's just something that anybody does when you're young, and have like sensation on your hand or whatever. But you see it in um, babies as well as social primates. Like they just have this natural grasping sort of tendency. There's also, I like this a lot. It's called the fencing reflex. I learned about this when I was an undergrad. You may have seen this as well. Whenever you put your 1 year old to bed, and is it a boy or a girl?
Girl.
Girl. Three girls?
Yep.
Oh, Lord help you.
I got them all.
Um, so when you put your 1 year old to bed, do you ever notice that she kind of like lays out, but she puts like one hand above her head, sort of, and the other one like pointed out, and then she turns her head this way?
Yeah, that's how they sleep.
Yeah, exactly. Almost like
Sometimes
you're
like this.
dabbing, right? Exactly, right? That's an
She
innate.
does dab sometimes. Yeah, like this.
Exactly, yeah. That's an innate response that you're going to find in human babies everywhere you go. Anywhere you go in the world, human babies do that.
They all kind of. We made the dab joke a few times.
Yeah, it's called the fencing stance or the fencing reflex.
Also, they root around a lot when they're first born too,
They
looking
root
for the
around.
milk. They root. It's real. That's what they saw. That's what they tell you in the hospital. She's rooting.
Looking around for it. Or it's like I think if you put her up to like against like a really soft, like fleshy kind of surface, I think she'll start suckling, like up on like your cheek or something, like a kiss almost.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah, yeah,
something
yeah.
else that babies will do that no one talks about. If you blow in their face, they all make the same face.
Really.
Yeah, they go. They blink, and it's the funniest thing. The first time I saw it, I laughed till I about puked. Just gently blow in their face, they'll go.
Yeah, no, eventually that all goes away. I mean, hopefully.
Yeah,
Um,
they stop it.
yeah, next time we roll, I'm gonna try that on random people.
Just blow in their face. What the?
The windbag defense.
Snap your neck.
Anyway, it's kind of the idea now, isn't it? Um, yeah. So there's that sort of thing. The one of the biggest sort of like prospects in this kind of research is language acquisition, language development. The idea behind pigeon languages is kind of a big deal. Basically, if you have two cultures that come together and they speak different languages to one another, they have to communicate somehow, right? So they'll create this weird sort of like mesh of the individual languages. And typically the more dominant language is the one that like stands out. And then the minority language is the one that has to kind of like adapt to it.
Is Jamaican and stuff, Creole, an example?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So a pigeon language is when you have two different populations coming together, but Creole happens to the generation of those kids. They
Is it called
basically
Lagap?
Lagap.
Lagniappe from Louisiana.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was actually looking at that earlier. I don't know. All I know is that the language they speak technically isn't Creole because it's similar enough to French to not be considered its own language.
I had an example of that I was going to look at, but I can't find it in my comic. I can't find it in my comic book collection. There's a hot sauce called Zombie Cajun hot sauce that came with its own comic book, and it was talking about that Creole and Lagniappe.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what it is, dude. So you have so pigeon, I found out the term pigeon derives from business. And the idea is that if you want to do business between two different people, but you don't speak the same language, you got to figure out some kind of compromise. And what I'm saying is that the kids of that generation will come up with their own language. It's a combination thereof that uses like its own grammatical structure, and basically puts both concepts together, and they can speak that fluently.
That makes sense. That's probably most languages. Pigeon at one point.
Yeah, exactly. And the argument is that people can just do that. We don't have to like, learn anything. We can just hear what's going on around us and then innately put that together into some kind of language, right? Hold on. Can I share screen? Is that possible?
I'm sure.
Let me see.
Thanks to the pandemic, anything's possible on Zoom.
No, you've disabled it. You got to enable it.
What?
Please enable me.
How in the world? Here.
So I didn't realize that.
There you go. I got admin privileges over here. Fuck them at work.
Yeah, so I didn't realize that in America, Hawaiian, I guess, has like pigeon languages to it. So I found this. I think this is super cool.
You can ask Jaren at the gym about it. Hey, what is that? You likey? Wiki?
Yeah, hold on. Check this out.
What are these languages or words?
They're words in Hawaiian. So check this out.
We're still here. I'm just reading it.
Oh, can you not hear it?
No.
Oh no.
I said we're still here. I'm just reading it.
Damn. All right. Well, yeah. So the idea is that Manapua refers to pork dumplings in Hawaii, but it derives from this phrase, which is like Mia ona pua a, right? And that literally translates to. I'm gonna see if you can pull it up here.
I wonder why I can't hear it. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, that's weird. So that phrase in Hawaiian, Mia, I'm sure I'm butchering it. Mia ono pua a refers to delicious pork thing. That's what it literally translates to, and that's Hawaiian, right? But I guess there were a lot of Chinese people in Hawaii around the time. This is like, I guess, over 100 years ago. I don't know much about the culture. And they don't speak Hawaiian, right? So the Hawaiian people were referring to a pork dumpling this way as delicious pork thing. And that then translates to what we call it today, which is Manapua. So if you have the child of these native Hawaiians go to the pork bun place, they'll ask for a Manapua, and now it's just what we call it.
That's what the name of the pig was on Moana. Pua.
Pua. Hey, there you go. For pork.
Yep.
Yeah, so pigeon languages are sort of an instinctual thing. Steven Pinker talks about that. Noam Chomsky is kind of a bigger psychologist, talks about that. Yeah, these are all sort of I guess human instincts and aspects that combine this idea of like the brain controls behavior and a bunch of other stuff, right? And that humans have this like biological starter package, right? And if you drop them off somewhere, they develop language on their own.
Lord of the Flies style.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That's why anytime you see them you see like a thing where a culture has been by itself for 10,000 years, or like a Planet of the Apes kind of situation. It's all like, they've all got a way of speaking. It's just like, what in the world?
Yeah, and man, come to think of it, I don't know as much as I probably should about it. The uh what is it, Coco the gorilla learning language
Yeah.
sort of studies. Um, but that's a real thing that really happened. And she had a playmate. I can't think of the playmate's name. That they also taught sign language, and they would just hang out with each other and chat about things.
Oh, the cat, or she had another monkey.
Another gorilla. Yeah, hold on, look it up real quick.
Amy from Congo was a sign language gorilla. Amy, good gorilla, good gorilla. Oh, it's Pigeon Languages, Pidgin.
Yeah, oh yeah, not like pigeon the bird.
Yeah, I had to look it up. I was about 6 months ago. I found out about what is Jamaican called. Jamaicans called something. Jamaican language. Jamaican me crazy.
Jamaican me crazy.
It's a good coffee, Sumatra.
I like it. Ah, damn. No, I know that she had a friend, but I can't think.
I know she had a cat that died.
Yeah, she had a pet kitten that she was really into, and she got like really depressed.
Yeah.
Really depressed.
Jamaican patois. That's what Jamaican language is called. That's crazy. Jamaica.
Hanabiko. Nope.
Patois.
Patois.
That's how you say patois. I'm so freaking white American. Patois. Patois.
No, I don't have it. That patois over there.
That sounds like something you put hot sauce on. What about pork patois? Pua patois.
It sounds like a Mexican dish when you say it.
That's why I don't like LSU, because they come to town and be
all right, never mind. I can't find it.
well, way to go. Podcast is ruined.
Damn. All right, just cut this out of the final bit.
We should just cut straight to the Hexaco thing now.
Oh shit!
Yeah, we've all been waiting for. Well, I'm not pressed for time too much. Maybe like a half hour more.
Yeah, let me just give you a.
Because I don't want the Anchor, the podcast upload app. I don't know. One time I did too long of one because I was back here rambling about something. It wouldn't upload. I'm like, well, son of a bitch. So I try to keep them to under an hour and a half.
All right, word. So yeah, just really quickly, the lexical hypothesis. We've written it down somewhere, right? Sir Francis Galton came up with this idea. And the concept was, we could take all the words in the English dictionary and we could boil them down to a set number of personality traits, right? Or personality characteristics. Mm-hmm. And then we can create questionnaires from there. Yeah, so this dude's pretty cool. He also did the nature versus nurture thing. But he was also big into social Darwinism, and fingerprints and a bunch of other. He developed the way to record fingerprints. That's kind of cool. So he's like grandpa, but grandpa's got a skeleton, some skeletons in his closet that we don't really talk about. You know what I mean? The Cosby Show was really funny, is all I'm saying. I'm not saying
it was funny. His comedy special was good too.
Yeah, it was really good, right? All I'm saying is grandpa, it's from a different time. Anyway, yeah, he was very big into eugenics.
Really?
Yeah, very, 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 very big in eugenics and social Darwinism. We don't really talk about that too much anymore. And I mean, there's a lot of people who kind of followed suit for a long time after that. Okay, so this idea that traits can be derived from the dictionary, they started off with 400,000 terms. And from there, Gordon and Allport, who are like some of the famous people for coming up with something called the Big Five, boiled it down to about 4,500 terms that might describe what people are. And then Cattell and Fisk broke it down to about 5 categories. So from this like 400,000 word list, using archaic words, also every word that they could possibly find, right? We got 5 major categories that can be used to describe elements of personality, right? And that was then refined further by Costa and McCrae in the 1980s into something called the Big Five, which is what the hexaco is derived from. So the concept is that the 5 big ones from the Big Five are extroversion, introversion, right? Conscientiousness, so how sort of like diligent you are at working towards things. Neuroticism, which is emotional stability, right? How much does emotion sort of like play a role in your happenings? And that's not the best way to think about it, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Agreeableness, so do you promote social harmony, right? and then openness to new experiences. How open are you to experiencing new things, right? Those are the big five. And this is derived conscientiousness.
I was Googling it. Sorry.
Yeah, no, go for it. So that was the big five. And oh, sorry, that's trying to ask something.
Oh no, I was
Yeah.
looking at my screen here.
Yeah.
I'll pay attention. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. You're good. Just really excited about like explaining this stuff.
Yeah.
So those are the big five. And whereas earlier I talked about how the Myers-Briggs doesn't really replicate that well across cultures, and it's cool to have types. And I do agree that it can describe people very well. I do associate with like the ENFP category. I do. But from a statistics like science point of view, it's not a good tool. This tool replicates across cultures. So if you were to back translate all the words used in the big five into like Cantonese, and then go back and forth until the phrases make sense, and then give the test to a bunch of Cantonese or Chinese people who speak Cantonese, they will answer the questions the same way that an American person would answer the questions. So the overall results might be different, but like they are answering it as we would answer it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we're talking about like high reliability, like over 70% of the variance of a data set can be explained by them, just the answers they have to their questions.
They're really granular questions too. It's not like specifically kind of like Myers-Briggs is more broad. Seems like the Hexaco ones are more deep down.
Oh yeah, no, they'll get at you as a person. So speaking of which, Ashton and Lee come around in 2004, which is kind of where we are currently. And I'm in love with the Hexaco, although it does have some problems to it. It's based off of the trait approach, this idea that we have individual characteristics, and the lexical analysis as a way to kind of get there. So they said that the Big Five is good, but it doesn't have as good cross-cultural reliability as we would like. They did a follow-up analysis, and they said, well, actually, there's a sixth factor here, which is the honesty-humility factor, and that helps describe the way people interact with each other in a social setting, right? And then that's how we get to the Hexaco.
I'll say you didn't mention the honesty humility one a while ago.
Yeah.
I was
yeah.
reading.
Hold on. I have your printout right here. I'm having a lot of fun with this today. Okay, so yeah, without further ado, so Hexaco stands for honesty, humility, emotionality, extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, openness, and then there's also an altruism one, but that's not considered part of like the main six factors. But yeah, a lot of it's the same from the Big Five. What really changes here is that honesty, humility factor. That basically talks about how you interact with others, sort of like, and what your like rationale for interacting with others is, right? Are you willing to interact with them for personal gain? Are you looking out for sort of like the community at large? Basically, what's your motivation for doing things? Is the sort of the way I think about it. And like in your case, what did you score? You got a 3.6. Actually, just for you. Hold on. Just for you, I've even done this.
I just tried to open the file and it expired. Whatever.
Just look at the
beat Dizzle.
Oh yeah, it's just for you. Yeah, let me bring you back. Hold on, where'd you go?
Altruism. I like how I scored high on altruism. Felt good about myself there.
Oh, also, hold on. So this range will show you about 50% of the population, where 50% of the population scored for each of these. Yeah, so honesty was right about median, and each factor has 4 subfacets to it, right? So for honesty, humility, you have sincerity, which you scored really low on, or relatively low on, right? You're like in the lower, I don't know, 30% of people or whatever. Fairness, greed avoidance, and modesty. And the only thing that's really bringing your score down to like the like lower end of the median. I mean, you're still in the median. You're basically
yeah. What the hell? How did I get in below average in honesty? I feel like I'm above the average American in honesty.
So the all right, hold on. So greed avoidance. Greed avoidance just talks about like, do you have a motivation to make money? And you're about the same as everybody else. Modesty. I get how modest you are, right? Pretty straightforward. You're basically everybody else. Fairness, you're above average. People that are fair typically will give credit where credit is due, right? So if someone is, if like, okay, so for example, if you had somebody who you don't like, right, they're really annoying, they're a pest, whatever, and they do a really good job, A really, really fair person would still be like, you know what, that person did a great job and like overlook the rest of who they are. People that are moderately fairness will, they'll still be fair in their decisions. But they'll keep other factors in mind as well. What does their thing say? Yeah, avoid fraud and corruption for fairness. Sincerity is, do you mean everything you say to people in the majority of situations? And based off of what you said earlier, where like if you're in a scenario at a hospital and you don't really know what's going on, you start playing like radio host. I
Yeah,
guess.
a good example. A few years ago, my grandfather was med flighted to Huntsville,
Uh-huh.
and all of a sudden, I'm like the local comedian in the waiting room. Like, how did this happen? Like, my defense mechanism has turned into this person that, like, this extreme extroverted comedian. That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, and I could see yourself doing that just to sort of like, let me think of a good way to phrase this.
If I don't have a way to get out of the situation, all of a sudden I turn into it and become like the head of the situation.
Yeah, I could see that. And you probably wouldn't mind telling people certain stuff just to kind of like, get the situation over with and move on with the situation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that's what sincerity is talking about. That's why you're slightly below average. Because you're probably
Shysta.
yeah, exactly. You're more willing to fraud people in terms of like being a silver-tongued devil than the majority of people.
I'm not gonna fraud anyone. I'm just saying.
Oh, sure. Just talk them up a little bit. How's that?
I will.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. Emotionality, you're relatively
I'm kind of
high.
proud of that fact.
What, proud of the emotionality fact?
No, I'm proud of the fraud. I'm proud of my silver-tongued devilness.
That's right. Yeah, it's silver-tongued devil, right? It's not fraud.
That's why you always accuse me of playing Joker guard at jiu-jitsu.
That's right. Yeah.
Because you've seen it firsthand how I act when I'm in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it makes a lot of sense, right? And it's a good quality for someone who is, like you said, like a radio talk show host. You just kind of say, you have to keep up a persona, right? That's the idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so actually that's probably what it means more than anything else. And that combined with a few other things we'll get to here in a little bit, really would help out for keeping up that that character that you're playing. You know what I mean?
What's that second one? Emotionality? Okay.
Yeah, emotionality. Yeah. That's talking more about like the need for emotional support from others, as well as like fearfulness is an element here, kind of like how much your emotions play a role in your decisions and actions and behaviors. So in your case, you scored relatively high on it. Fearfulness is on the very high end. Anxiety is dead average. Dependence is basically average. How much sentiments you have towards other people, and sentimentality is like you feel the need for like that social bond, right, with other people. Like you really make sure you say goodbye. You make sure people know that they're like well cared for and taken care of or whatever, right? That's basically average. The only thing that's really high here is fearfulness.
That's the old fear of being alone. That exists.
Well, no, it's not actually. It's not. It isn't. This one's different. Fearfulness is basically, and I got my cheat sheet here. If I can find it, Jesus.
How much of a cheat sheet is it?
No, I should have prepared better for this.
Yeah, way to go.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's mostly in terms of physical stuff. That's it. So fearfulness is in terms of like putting yourself in like physical danger or situations that might not turn out well for you. Almost like a sense of cautiousness.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it is less about thrill seeking. People that are really, really low like to put themselves in situations that might, or they don't mind putting themselves in situations that might turn out for the worse. You know what I mean? Like they'll just like go for like a thrill ride, basically. You know what I mean? People that are higher in this are a bit more cautious. And that's the only reason your emotionality is higher. Other than that, you're pretty much dead average.
That makes sense. Terrified of it. Well, I do some thrill seeking, but I'm scared to death of like worrying about, get out of here. Go. Told you a kid would be in here.
Yeah, it's just slightly higher than average. It's not well, I mean, you're in like the top 10% of people that score like here for fearfulness. And yeah, it's not to say that like you'll never go out and do stuff, right? Like personality tests like this, like the Hexaco, they don't tell you good or bad, and they don't tell you like determinants, right? Like this isn't like the end all be all. Yeah. This is just a general tendency that goes across situations, which to me would probably indicate that you're a bit more cautious than most. Like maybe slightly more calculated in making decisions.
Yeah. Smart.
Let's go. Yeah, there you go. You got it.
I'll tell you one thing I always complain about is I'm always say that I'm more worried about things that I can't change than things that I can. So
yeah. I can see that.
How's that door? Jesus. I'm always worried more about tornado warnings than I am about, getting hurt, about something I can avoid, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so like the lack of control.
Yeah, I hate it. I hate it so much.
Yeah, so actually to give you an idea, I even did this. Here's you compared to me.
You're down there.
Yeah, I'm pretty low. I'm on the lower end of like the average. Actually, I have the range in here too. So we're like basically inverted on quite a few things actually. Yeah, and like in my case, my approach to the situation is if I can't control it, then it's just like water off a duck's back. Like we'll just see what happens.
I start freaking out.
Yeah, exactly. And like actually I was talking to Caesar about this. For those of you who don't know, I guess he's the guy that we roll with. And he's the same way. He's just like the dude's wild, man. And he'll just like want to bring it on. You know what I mean? But it sounds to me like you're probably more willing to like stop and contemplate the consequences of a situation. Not all the time, but in general, you're probably a bit more alert or aware of consequences and might be like, I don't think I want to do this. That sound about right?
I can see it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
More than like, and so again, to give you an idea with mine, I score really low, relatively low in emotionality. I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm like bottom 10%. And for me, I'll just take it as it comes, right? Like whatever it is, like we'll just roll with it. We'll see what happens. Extroversion, relatively low. Again, people I think focus on the social interaction side of extroversion, but there also is like this element of what it is you're focusing on. Let me see. Let me go back to the range. And like you're way down there, dude. You're like,
oh, totally.
Yeah, you're like bottom 5%, I think, something like that. A little bit higher, maybe like bottom 8%.
I'm clinically introverted.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I was looking through this, and so it's low on everything in general, but mostly social boldness and sociability. So sociability is the same idea, bouncing around and talking to everybody and everything. And again, to give you an idea, like I'm way up here, right? Mostly because I'm way higher in these particular zones, and everything. I just score really high. I'm like really, really, really extroverted, in all sort of like respects. But yeah, do you enjoy going out conversing for the sake of conversing? Like, will you go spend your free time running out to people just to go and talk to them? You know what I mean? And just you see what I mean?
I tell you what it is. When I do find some place that I'm really familiar with, I become like the life of the party, though.
That exactly, and that's what it is, right? So same with social boldness, right? You're talking about like your comfort in dealing with different scenarios or different social settings, right? So it's like the comfort isn't necessarily there, right? It's not that I want to go out and do this, but once I do start doing this, we can open it up and go do whatever. You see what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, so if something is my idea and something I'm a regular at, I'm like a super extrovert. Look at this cat out here. Good Lord, shut up. Cat bit me.
Oh, man.
Loud thing. Oh. That is loud.
Yeah, so if I had to guess, I mean, I would probably say that you enjoy small scale interactions that last for extended periods of time. So rather than being at like a big party and bouncing around talking to everybody, you enjoy probably like seeing a few people together and then like starting up something there and then just letting that roll.
Unless it's my party, then I want to talk to everyone.
Yeah, that's fair. What, you're the man in charge?
Finally, yeah, like I like to have everybody at my house. I like to have the parties at my house. When my grandparents used to live on a farm, I would have all the parties of my friend group there. But I never wanted to go to anybody's party. I never wanted to go to bars.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I wanted everything on my terms.
Yeah, you want control of the situation.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. All right, so I'm going to jump over to conscientiousness then. That's probably the
weird, man. I'm telling you.
One. Yeah, so conscientiousness. We're both super low on this one. Let me go to you. So you're right about there, right? So relatively low. Conscientiousness refers to, I'm going to read their description.
Conscientiousness, you said?
Yeah.
Sorry, I got a text right then.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it in terms of organization. I don't know if they differ.
What is conscientiousness? I didn't.
It's basically someone's like diligence, willingness to organize. If you want to do something, how likely are you to follow it through? That's the general idea.
Sounds like something my dad would say. You need to be more conscientious.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So persons with very high scores organize their time into physical surroundings, work in a disciplined way towards a goal, strive for accuracy
Oh,
and perfection in their tasks, and are deliberately careful when making decisions.
I'm reading that one too.
Yeah.
On the
So
green page.
the stereotypical conscientious person, I just think of a blacksmith, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like that dude who has to make sure all the stuff is in the right sort of order. You enjoy the organization of things. You enjoy making sure that like the process is being followed the way the process should be followed, like quality assurance checks, that sort of thing. And where did you score on here? Organization, lower 10%. Diligence,
I really hate this about myself because it's really not how I am.
lower 12%.
At work, I wouldn't say I'm organized, but I don't let things fall between the cracks. But yeah, I don't. I tend to set things in motion that work a certain way without having to pay attention to them. If that makes any sense.
No, absolutely.
I'll do something really hard and put a lot of effort into something in order to not have to worry about something a lot later.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And so a highly conscientious person instead would want to be very, very much on top of stuff.
That makes
So
sense.
yeah, so that also brings up sort of the topic of like what is a disorder? Like what is a personality disorder? And the idea is that to be classified as a disorder, like obsessive compulsive disorder, it needs to have a negative impact on your life and cause distress, right? So it typically in OCD people, you see crazy high levels of conscientiousness, as well as like in this case, probably emotionality, right? So like really, really fearful, really anxious, that sort of thing, and also have this need for organization. So the need for organization and putting things in their proper place, that will act as a stress reliever. You know what I mean?
I wish I had that.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I was dating a girl who was like this, and every night before she went to bed, she would have to wash her face and brush her teeth. And I remember there was one night where we were in Chicago together visiting some friends of hers, and she didn't have her toothbrush and her like her face wash with her. She
Hmm.
couldn't go to sleep. She could not go to sleep because that's what she did every single night. You see what I mean?
Yeah, that's not me. I'll do things really hard to be able to not have to worry about things later.
I believe we call that efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, went to college, so I didn't have to worry about working at a factory. I took a lot of hard tests, so I didn't have to worry about being in a low position. And
Yeah, and so if you compare that to somebody who went to college because they were told, like, these are the next steps that you take, right? You are meant to go to college. You are meant to major in this, right? You are meant to read these chapters of these books at these times, right? And so you will read these chapters of these books at these times. I mean, that's like a really extreme example, but that's the sort of like core of the idea behind conscientiousness.
I think mine began that way. It just ended with me figuring out to do something, not have to do the hard stuff, not to work in a factory, a paper mill.
Yeah, and I'm sure that like that thought process is always there. Like I'm sure like in the background there was this idea of like, well, why am I doing this, right? Like what's sort of the idea? And again, you can like highly conscientious people. Typically their answer will be like something to the effect of, well, that's just what you're supposed to do.
That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go to college.
Exactly. Yeah. Or a bunch of other stuff. So you want a highly conscientious person to be like filing quality assurance stuff, right? Or checking like I don't know, documents to make sure they're all in the right order. You know what I mean? Or taking calls and schedule meetings. You want a highly conscientious person there because it's fulfilling for them to put things into a particular order or place.
Well, this test got that one right about me then. That, I don't
uh,
want to worry with anything anymore than I have to.
so I want to do openness, then come back to agreeableness real quick.
I don't agree to that.
With openness.
I'm just kidding. That's not agreeable.
Well, I could see it. I could see it. I could see it. All right. Now that we're sort of learning some stuff. Okay, so
This is like I'm enjoying this more than I really anticipated.
I get that all the time.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
and it's much more in depth too. So there's a book I list on my Instagram called The H Factor of Personality. It was written by Ashton Lee, the guys who came up with this back in the like I think late 2000s, early 2010s, something like that. And they talk about coming up with the hexaco, right? And like the story behind it and what it means. And what they really hone in on is like this H factor, and they combine it with other stuff. So right now you have basically run of the mill H, and I think you and I are basically in the same. Oh, I'm really high H. Never mind. We'll talk about that. So I'm really high H, right? I'm high H and I'm high E. And I mean, I think it's kind of evident the way I bounce around. I talk to a lot of people. I like to just have conversations for the sake of having conversations, even if I don't know the person. You know what I mean? Make
Mhm.
friends super easily, that sort of thing, right? I'm also relatively high in honesty, and I've been described as many as being honest to a fault. Like, you know, wear your heart in your sleeves. And I very much try to, and I honestly do this. I try to sort of like encapsulate the American hero type approach to life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I do. I do try to be this way. And ever since I was a kid, I was trying to be that way. You know what I mean? The
Steven
do-gooder.
Rogers over here.
Dude, I'm telling you, or like I was dating this girl from Detroit for a little bit, and we were downtown. Well, she lives here, but she's from Detroit originally. And we were downtown, and I remember we were walking around and we heard some shouting from like a few blocks over, right? And I was like, I need to go investigate. And she said, No, don't be white right now. You stop being
Don't
white,
be
right?
white.
Yeah, she's a black girl from Detroit. So she was like, Nah, we go this way. We go away from the violence. But ever since she said that, I've noticed, I'm like, damn, if there's something going on, I want to go and investigate the situation.
Don't be
Because to
white.
me, huh? Don't be
Don't be
white.
white.
Dude, it just feels like the right thing to do. And they combine it with a bunch of other stuff too. So like if you're, for example, low honesty and really like low agreeableness, for example, you're just a fucking asshole. Because you want to argue about everything to anybody because you just like making their lives miserable. It's just fun for you.
It explains that one.
Well, in your case, well, you're actually not that low for honesty, but we're going to come back to agreeableness. We'll do that before openness, actually. All right. So agreeableness. Agreeableness actually is about like maintaining social harmony. It's kind of like not stirring the boat or not rocking the boat or stirring the pot. Very people that are very high in agreeableness do whatever they can to stop problems from happening. You see what I mean? And like I'm sure you know some of these folk, like those earthy, crunchy, like hippie yoga folk.
I try not to, but I do.
But you know what I'm talking about? Like, yeah, man, let's just all get our energy in sync, man. Like, no violence. Yeah, that's really high agreeableness. Like you don't want to see problems happen. Not just them, but I mean like you need these people in society, right? You do. Because if you don't have these people, who are supposed to be your caretakers? People that are low in agreeableness tend to enjoy arguing. Not that they will do it all the time, but that they're not afraid to demonstrate differences of opinions. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, like in your case, forgivingness is really low. So if somebody slights you and it's really obvious that they've slighted you, does it kind of like stand out in your head?
I tell you what, I remember that question. It's more not along the lines of I would hold a grudge outside of my. I wouldn't act like I held a grudge, but I would always remember it. It's not like I want to get revenge on someone.
Yeah, I've got a lot of exes like that.
Because because customers at work are a lot like that. The ones that are extremely like, I'm better than you because I'm not IT.
Yeah.
I remember they just get nicknames sometimes. And I'm thinking, come on, man, don't be. But I'm not going to be mean to him or anything.
Yeah. So to give you an idea, someone who's really high in forgivingness, if that person were to say, I'm sorry, they're like, okay.
Yeah.
And that's it. You know what I mean? But I mean, like, it doesn't necessarily require that much of an explanation. It's just one of these things where, like, they're more willing to get over things really quickly, right? And it's not to say that like you hold grudges. I insert like you know, good cultural reference here. But that it stands out that like in the back of your head you'll have these things in mind about what they've done, and it will potentially influence future decisions.
I remember it.
Yeah, and so again, to give you an idea, I don't remember. I think I'm really, really high on forgivingness. Because again, my mentality in general, I don't know where I am in general here actually. Yeah, I'm higher. Because in general, like if someone slights me, I'll try to consider it from everything else they're going through as a person, and that will affect how I think about like the implications of their decision or what they said or whatever, right? But a lot of people fall like way lower, like around midline. Um, okay, gentleness. On the lower side, gentleness is whether you're going to sugarcoat things or not.
Where's that at?
You are at 2.5. The lowest, the lower 10% stops at 2.25. Yeah, also, or being lenient when dealing with people. Like, I guess like the way to think about it is like how much give are you willing to give to somebody if they like want something from you or whatever, right? Or is it easy for you to stand your ground and be like, no, I'm gonna get fucked over if you do this. I'm not gonna let you do this. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I'm probably more of a pushover than anything, so for the most part.
You think so?
Yeah, because I don't like to be too assertive. Because I'm like, dang, I'll stand my ground sometimes.
I think it's less about being assertive and more about like whether you pay attention to that, if that makes sense. Because the assertiveness side with throat would fall into extroversion. So if you have like high extroversion and low agreeableness, then that is somebody who knows what they want, they're willing to fight for it, and they don't mind putting the effort in. You know what I mean? But if you have like if you have introversion and low agreeableness, then it probably means rather than going directly at somebody, you'll keep it in mind in the back of your head. And then the next time you get the chance to make a decision that fucks them over back, you probably wouldn't mind doing it.
Nah,
Did that hit it?
I don't know. I'm not much of a revenge person.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's good.
I go
That's
back
good.
and forth on that kind of stuff. I really
Okay.
don't try to get back at people.
That's good.
I just remember it a lot and try not to let them do it again.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Flexibility, your flexibility is like really low. And flexibility doesn't mean openness to new ideas at all. It means how easily can somebody sway your opinion. And if you have really low flexibility, it probably means that if you have an opinion on something, like if you have a stance on something, the person has to make a very convincing case in order to persuade you or move you to their side.
That would be 100%.
Yeah. And then your patience is also relatively low. Which I mean is exactly that. It's patience. Like, how willing are you to sit around and like wait for something to like finish or someone to do something, right? Especially if they haven't done the thing that you need them to do. So like if someone at work makes the same mistake like 5 times in a row,
Oh yeah.
you see what I mean?
Like, come on, man.
Yeah, it's like, dude, we've been over this. Like, dude, just do the thing. Just do what you need to do.
I'll probably do it myself then.
Yeah, exactly. That makes a lot of sense. All right, so the last one is openness, which I think I misspelled. I think there's
Openness.
2 N's. Oh, yeah,
Opineness.
opineness. Okay,
Okay.
your opineness. You're moderate to moderate high, and it's mostly because of this first question. I think this first question is what brings everybody down in general. Other than that, you have very high openness to experience. And openness to experience just talks about literally how open are you to the idea of experiencing new things, going outside the norm, or do you have these sets of like social rules that you adhere yourself to, right? People that are low in openness tend to be very conventional, and people that are high in openness tend to be willing to explore opportunities. You see what I'm saying?
What's the first question? I'm gonna look at it.
I
I
don't.
understand, acknowledge the test. Yep.
What?
I'm just reading.
The
I would
first
be
one,
quite bored to visit an art gallery. Yep.
yeah, it's aesthetic appreciation.
Very agreeable.
Yeah, aesthetic appreciation. That's something that always brings everyone down. Mine's super low too, just because like it's okay, but I don't really have as much appreciation for art as some people do.
No,
But
I don't like art. I don't I have a
at
hard
all,
time. Not in the form of a gallery.
that's
But
fair.
like
Yeah.
I don't mind because I'm Catholic, so I like going to art. I see art all the time. Like the Vatican, that kind of stuff. Doesn't really
Yeah.
impress.
No, I totally understand. And that's the thing, right? People that are like really, really high in openness, we're talking about like upper levels, like, 4.5, 5, or whatever the open, yeah, 4.5 to 5. Um, they tend to be the super eccentric types, kind of like, I'm trying to think of an idea. I mean, think of like a 1970s pimp. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're just rocking it like it's nothing. Like they're just rocking it because like you can.
It's a hell of an example.
That's all I got. I can't do the movie examples like you can do, man. I can't do the music examples. I don't have any of that shit because I never went outside as a kid.
Maybe you should
I
do
just
better.
I sat around the house and did stuff like this.
I
Um,
had 3 channels and I watched TV a lot, and I went fishing.
there you go. Well, just if you want to just add a really fun example in post to replace the pimp one, feel free.
Yeah, well, no, I'm leaving
Otherwise,
pimp.
god damn it.
I was thinking, more along the lines of the Great Gatsby type of people.
Actually, yeah, no, that's a really good
Yeah.
example. Yeah, people that are really high in openness are very much like that. And again, in the book, they talk about if you're really high in openness and like really low in honesty, which I don't know where Gatsby would fall into that. People that are really high in openness and really low in honesty, those are people that are all about showing off wealth or showing off materialistic goods or like demonstrating that they're the like ultimate pendulum of fashion or whatever. If you're really high in honesty and also really high in openness, you're typically the kind of person who just enjoys being spontaneous and erratic for the sake of just, being weird.
That's kind of like Great Gatsby.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's just kind of how that goes. That's if you're really high in openness in general. So aesthetic appreciation talks about art appreciation, and oddly enough, wherever you look, appreciation for the arts is a relative facet of personality that pops up in every culture you look at, as far as I know. Please don't fact check me. Inquisitiveness, you're like top 12% for how inquisitive you are, how likely you are to just investigate things that you think are interesting.
Yep.
Creativity, like super high, which also makes a lot of sense, right? Especially if you're gonna have a podcast about anything you want, right?
Yep.
And then unconventionality. So here's what's interesting: your sense of unconventionality is still moderate. It's still like somewhere in the center here, right? Which means that the things that you're talking about aren't completely like off the wall, like Joe Rogan kind of like craziness, right?
Not
Um,
all the time, no.
exactly, right? They're still grounded in some sense of reality, right? It's not like Eddie Bravo type
I'll
ridiculousness.
tell you, I really got off the deep end in the Eddie Bravo area. Even met the dude.
Really?
Yeah, me and little Randy met him a year or so ago. And then COVID happened and the conspiracies all got real. And I'm like, fuck that. I'm coming back. I'm gonna dial it back just a little bit because it got really real really quick. So yeah,
Yeah. What's he like in
I'm
person?
back more toward the things that are more plausible now instead of space is fake. I'm telling you, it became like a moderate, like a out of 1 out of 10, it's like a 1.5 phobia of conspiracy for a couple of weeks during COVID. Now I'm kind of back. Now I'm kind of back listening to it, but man, it got. I was extreme before COVID, then I went, oh no, no, no. Let's go back down here.
What's the dude like in person?
He's a little jujitsu dude, real nice. Baked out of his mind.
All the time?
Yeah, he was you know, not saying being short is bad, D1.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's about kind of walks up to you kind of about his stance. And I shook his hand, introduced myself, told him my real name like he gave a damn. Like, hi, Eddie Bravo. Nice. I'm like you ever gonna remember this? Yeah, he was
Damn.
nice. They did a Q&A after they did a comedy routine and then they did a Q&A after it. It was pretty good.
That's solid. Yeah, so he's batshit, right?
Yeah,
And
he's out there.
he probably scores like really high on openness, like
I
really,
would
really, really, really fucking
I'd
high.
pay $100 to see his score.
I mean, get him on the channel.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. So on that same like note, people that are really high in openness, are also typically more willing to seek out, like new experiences, right? So, like, I mean, a classic example is like drug use potentially, or, other sorts of like not thrill seeking necessarily, but new adventures, right? Going to different countries and just spending, weeks or whatever, getting to know I don't know, one particular facet of it, or maybe like getting really into Rubik's cubes. Maybe they found something really interesting that they're interested in pursuing, and then they pursue the hell out of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That sort of thing.
I do get obsessed with stuff and go down to the nth degree. So I've got this book here. You can see it.
Hold on. I need to bring
But
up.
that's
Oh, there
crazy.
you are. Yeah, there you are.
I mentioned it never caught, but this is called Your Blue Flame. It's about finding your passion and stuff.
Yeah.
I had the lady that wrote it on here, but she has a little questionnaire about your blue flame, and mine was it came up all the time traveling, more or less being like my blue flame.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
And it came down to new four-wheeler trails, new rivers to paddle, and like I love going on vacation.
Yeah.
That's what I kept writing down over and over. You know, going like we just got back from Montana and then Savannah, Georgia, that kind of stuff. Going to those new places.
Actually, yeah. What excites you about going somewhere new?
I don't know. Just I always want to move there when I get back. Especially the more outdoorsy and the more historical related it is. I don't really care about going to the beach.
No, no, no. That makes a lot of sense. No, that makes perfect sense. Because for you, again, it's more of the experience. It's more
The
about the.
beach bores the shit out of me, other than the occasional piece of fried mahi mahi or something like that.
No, I'm in the same boat as you. If I go someplace, I want to experience, in my case, the people. I want to experience the culture of wherever it
Yeah,
is I
yeah.
go. Yeah.
So I stayed in the high school band, not because I really like music that much. I wasn't that good at it. And my high school band teacher will tell you I wasn't. But we were like number one in the state in band wise. And we went to my friends that listen to that. They aren't listening now because they're almost 2 hours. I'm going to end soon. But that's beside. We went to the Rose Bowl parade, went to the Fiesta Bowl parade, went to Chicago, Washington, D.C. And then one year we went to Panama City. And the year we went to Panama City, I was like, this is the stupidest trip. What are we doing? We're not doing anything. We're in Panama City. There's nothing here. We went
Yeah.
to Washington, D.C. We saw a monument every day. We went to the Fiesta Bowl parade. We saw the Grand Canyon and deer. I love seeing deer. Went to Chicago. We got to have a pizza because I'm a foodie. That's why I'm fat. And see a Navy Pier in Lake Michigan. But Panama City, I was like, I've been to Panama City 1,000 times from Alabama. That's where I go. I just don't like the beach that much. Rather have something to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of that kind of goes together. So let me see. So again, the idea is that you don't take any of these in isolation. You take them sort of together.
Yep.
And I mean, you can see here, like this is the population median. It all kind of follows like a relatively straight up line. And this is an American population, by the way, just so you keep that in mind. And if you go to like China, again, despite the fact that this was created using the English language, actually the hexaco was made using a combination of English and I think Cantonese. Don't quote me on that next one, but it was using Asian dialects as well as the way to begin making the survey, right? They will answer the questions the same. And so their median might be lower. So I think if you go to like Japan, their honesty is way higher, their extroversion is way lower on baseline. Yeah, their agreeableness is way higher. Yeah, their conscientiousness is way higher on average, right? Openness, I think, is lower. I don't know where emotionality falls. If I had to guess, I'd say like somewhere down here. I don't know.
Under the one.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So taken together, again, the moderate honesty makes perfect sense. Lower extroversion, lower agreeableness, lower conscientiousness, or actually lower extroversion with lower agreeableness. Again, more intrinsic interests. They're interests that you have because they're what you want to investigate, right? You want to check out things that are intriguing or unique or different, whatever, right? And you're willing to question what is conventional knowledge, right? You're willing to question what's out there. And that means, in this case, because you're interested in people, you're willing to go to the folks that have other opinions and just see how well they mesh with what you understand, what they know, etc. Yeah, these are just sort of like some surface level ideas.
It really makes a lot of sense when you put it all together like that.
Yeah, you have to. What's really freaky is I think you can also use it to figure out what Jordan Peterson kind of does this. You can use this to kind of figure out what problems you're having with your spouse or girlfriend or whatever. Which, hey, this is kind of my go-to pickup line for being out of the bar these days. It works out real well, dude. People love talking about themselves.
Where does the altruism fit?
Yeah, so altruism just refers to how willing you are to make personal sacrifice for your society at large or your group, right? Whatever you define group to be. And this basically just means, in your case, you're probably willing to do whatever it is you have to do to like take care of your family, even if it means making sacrifices yourself. You know what I mean? If you have to give up something to make sure that the people that are part of your close group are okay. You know what I mean?
Yep.
If you're really low in altruism, it means fuck everybody else.
Yeah, we talked at work. I said, we're done with altruism. It doesn't help anybody. kept getting a no deed goes unpunished scenario pop up left and right.
Yeah, it doesn't really work. No, you have to like put your foot down. And to give you an idea, like that none of this is good or bad, right? These are just sort of like trends. And so like people like you sound like they're better at looking at the efficiency of a system and making sure it's working and doing what it needs to do, right? And if it's not doing what it needs to do, you just got to figure out what the problem is and then move from there. That doesn't mean you're necessarily somebody who should be fact checking everything, right? But fact checking enough to make sure that it's working. You know what I mean?
That is true. As I've always said, if I ever have a business, I'm going to let people work however they want to. Just give me the results on time.
Yeah, it also makes sense why you probably want to be a moderator and have more than one person on the show just talking to one another, right?
Yeah, because just sitting around listening to people. Like I call it the old country store format.
Old country store.
I grew up way out in the boondocks, and I used to hang out at this old store and listen to half a dozen old men talk for like hours a day, and that was like my thing.
Uh-huh.
Go. Yeah, they're starting to give me the hook. But that was the basis to kind of the Blue Flame book again. Yeah, listening and sitting around, not necessarily being a part of the conversation all that much, just taking it all in.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I could totally see that. Especially if you're the person who has to kind of like, or not has to, but helps direct the conversation, right? Like, hey, let's just see what happens if we go this way a little bit, right? And then you guys just keep doing your thing. I'm just going to make sure that I understand where this thing is steering itself.
Well, I ask questions like, wait, what did you say? Drop the N-bomb?
Yeah. Oh my God, this podcast.
That happened a lot. That happened a lot in that store. That's another story.
So yeah, just really quickly, just to kind of wrap up. Again, personality isn't everything. They're just they're traits that exist across a variety of situations. Different situations can evoke like behaviors or thoughts or feelings that wouldn't be in accordance with this, though, right? Like situations can have very powering effects that make you act different potentially than you would across a majority of situations, et cetera, et cetera. And this isn't a complete representation of a culture either. Cultural effects do pop up, and it's almost like a combination of all the dominant personality types plus extra stuff that makes, like, for example, US culture very dramatically different from like Indian culture. But that's a whole other complicated thing. So whereas like psychologists focus on like the individual and how the individual differs from other people and is unique to themselves, sociologists do the same thing, but with culture, which is like one step above this. So it can just get so complicated so quick. And that's about all I got to say.
Yeah, I don't hate it. And this is the Hexaco, Hexaco.
Yeah, by Ashton and Lee, 2004.
.org.
Yeah, and the samples are always American samples. That's basically free. You're giving them free research whenever you go there.
Yeah, I'm going to put this in the description. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah,
I want to have all those dudes I work with take this too. If they don't have anything else to do,
you should
take this.
Just make sure they save the PDF. The one that you gave me is a printout of all the numbers. There's also one that has all of the like the box and whisker parts on.
I wonder why the whisker box didn't come out, because that's the one it gave me, and then the one I sent you was the only one it presented. It just had the numbers. Because I saw what you're talking about. It had the mean, and then where I was in it, and where it sit. I was looking at it, and then it came out with numbers. I'm like, I don't do numbers. It says numbers.
But yeah, actually, if you want to send me their stuff as well, I'd be more than happy to do a little something with it.
This podcast was way too sophisticated for the Bobby Dizzle. I mean,
I talked a lot. If you want to cut out like some of that history stuff, because I'm sure a lot of that can be summed up in like 15-20 minutes.
Shit, I'm laying it all down, cuz.
To get to the meat.
Yeah. Be under 2 hours anyway.
All right.
This was great though. I have to put you down as the we'll do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Wait, you'll do me again? Oh, thank God! Yeah. Fantastic. I'm glad somebody.
I will smash you.
Jesus. I told
Evan last night. I said I smashed Sully like ball.
What did he say back?
He goes, "That's what you're supposed to do." I'm like, I smashed your boy.
Oh, I'm telling you, dude.
I got killed the rest of the day. It's cool. I saw you one with John getting killed, so I didn't feel as bad.
Who the hell is John? Oh, the Viking dude.
Yeah.
Oh my god,
He
dude.
smash. He smash.
God, he's so aggressive. He'll come at you and he won't stop coming.
Is it going?
Dude, that's what it feels like, man.
Grizzly bear tactics.
He's like no, he's like a Tasmanian devil. Like I don't know. All I know is it's scary.
Yeah. All right, we'll go ahead and end her right now since we're in a good stopping spot and I feel thoroughly examined.
I'll sure think of some more stuff tonight or tomorrow and let you know at class.
Please do, because you can come back anytime. I need the filler.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been it's been a lot of fun.
Been great. I will see you tomorrow probably then.
Yeah, of course.
All right.
All right.
I'm going to end this.